ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि वदन्ति भूरिराजन्. Your words are like nectar, bring life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome to our class on the Gospel of Ramakrishna. We're on the chapter with the devotees in Calcutta. This the date was March 11th, 1885, and now we're up to page 733, and we started out at Balaram Bose's house, and then shifted to Girish Ghosh's house, which is just up the street. So Thakur just walked from there, and they were talking about Narendra, and then Narendra shows up. So he's also there. So we're with Girish and Narendra, and everyone forgive me, I'm having some allergy problems. So my mind may be a little fuzzy also. So there was there was a conversation about the avatar, and we know that Girish had tremendous faith in both the idea of the avatar, the reality of the avatar, and also that Sri Ramakrishna was an avatar. And we know that Narendra had doubts about the whole concept of the avatar, no doubts about Sri Ramakrishna. Of course, in the beginning, he thought he was a little bit crazy, but other than that, no doubts about him. But this whole concept, and Narendra used to go to Girish's house and hold these discussions, and Thakur would very often ask, "Did Narendra accept your views? This and that. What did he say?" So this we were in the midst of that conversation. So Girish was saying that to Narendra, how do you know that God does not assume a human body? And then Narendra is taking this view, he's beyond mind and thought. And how can that infinite absolute reality come in the form of a human being? So this was the type of argument going on. So the last thing that we saw was Girish was saying, unless God takes a human body to teach men divine knowledge and divine love, then how will we learn this? Who will teach that? This is one of the ideas. We have this Vitaritum Avatirnam, Jnana Bhakti Prasanti, Sri Ramakrishna and the hymn, the Pranam Mantra, that he came to earth in order to give knowledge and devotion and peace to everyone, and not just this idea of dharma and adharma, something more than that. So, Narendra, he answers, why? God dwells in our heart. He will certainly teach us from within the heart. And then Sri Ramakrishna says tenderly, yes, yes, he will teach us as our inner guide. Now we have this concept of the antaryamin. This is a concept that uh, takes this idea of God dwelling within as the witness, the sakshin, and brings in the idea of the personal God dwelling within, not just this pure awareness, but the indwelling presence of Ishvara, uh, who has the power to guide us and to be kind of an inner compass, moral compass, and conscience. And some will go so far as to say that he is the real actor within. So there are all different steps to this idea that indwelling presence can just be pure consciousness. It can be the witness. It can be personal God dwelling within, guiding us. It can be our very own self. We have all the different ways of looking at this idea. For the devotee, that it's not simply God dwelling within as consciousness, but as a presence. And for Sri Ramakrishna, it was the Divine Mother. And not only did she guide him, she spoke to him, she provided the word. So, all different ways of understanding this one phenomenon that we all agree on, that there's some feeling of everything we say and do being witnessed, and some feeling that I am the one who is the witness. And yet, Ramakrishna will say that this stick of ego will be a dividing line, and we'll look upon the other side, the stick of lying on the surface of the water, as personal God, God dwelling within, and all other individuals because of this stick of ego. Okay, so this is what we ended up with. Gradually, Narendra and Girish became involved in a heated discussion. If God is infinity, how can he have parts? So this was Swamiji's argument. And of course, from Swamiji's point of view, it's absolutely true if we take it that way. But this divine power that we call Ishvara or God goes beyond all of this logical arguments and everything. This is why we have that concept of Maya as something inscrutable. So if God is infinity, how can he have parts? What did Hamilton say? What were the views of Herbert Spencer, of Tyndall, of Huxley? So they bring in all of these Western thinkers, and so forth and so on. Master to M. I don't enjoy these discussions. Now, sometimes Sri Ramakrishna does enjoy them, and sometimes he'll encourage them. That we saw earlier that Ram is saying, what is the use of all these arguments? And then Thakur says, no, sharply. He says, no, there's a meaning in all of this. So he likes it to a point, but he knows that everything depends on the experience. So Master to him, I don't enjoy these discussions. Why should I argue at all? I clearly see that God is everything. He himself has become all. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, he used to divide the level of the devotee in terms of their understanding. So he would say that there's some devotees who think of God as somewhere in a different realm, in heaven or something like that, and they pray to that God. Good. There's some who see God dwelling within all beings. Now, we may think that this will be the highest, but it's not second highest. And the highest, he says, is those who see God in everything, see God manifest, that every visible object, everything is a manifestation of God. Now, we're using a very generic term, but sometimes Sri Ramakrishna will say of the Divine Mother, sometimes he'll say of Ishvara. We won't say that everything is a manifestation of this Nirguna Brahman, because that's a contradiction. The transcendent aspect is always transcendent. But if we take Brahman as both Saguna and Nirguna, then this will be this Nirguna, Saguna aspect. Then we can say that God is the material cause of the universe. So in that sense, a kind of oneness. Sometimes Thakur uses the phrase, the term Aishwarya, this lordly manifestation. This manifestation. So it's not exactly the same as saying that the individual soul and supreme soul are one, because we're saying that it's almost an emanation or a manifestation or an appearance, not absolute oneness, as the Advaitins will say with Jivatman and Paramatman. So this relieves them of that idea. How can that which is perfectly transcendent and pure and everything manifest as this physical universe? Either we say through Maya, or we say some type of process takes place. So anyhow, Thakur says, he is everything, but again, he is beyond everything. So Brahman is not exhausted in this manifest universe. Brahman remains transcendent, unchanged. So that sun, this is reflected in the different containers of water. It doesn't matter how many containers of water, how many reflected suns there are, that it doesn't affect the actual sun. It doesn't become less. This is our Purnamada Purnamidam, the famous hymn. That remains completely unchanged, full, perfect, absolute. And this manifest universe, that also becomes a enclosed system of its own, not infinite the way we understand infinity, but still. And one comes from the other, but it doesn't lessen anything from the other. So it's not that if we see every new reflected sun takes something away from the real sun. Real sun remains unaffected completely. So that's the transcendent aspect. So let me read this again. I clearly see, Ramakrishna, that God is everything. So everything is chinmaya, everything is somehow this ocean of consciousness takes some type of form. Chidghana, we use the term also. He himself has become all. I see that whatever is God. He is everything. Again, he is beyond everything. I come to a state in which my mind and intellect merge in the indivisible. So at that time, this universe completely disappears, not for other people, but for him. That for Swami Krishna, if he gets into that state, that even if the eyes are open, even if light and everything is coming into the eyeball, he won't experience anything. His mind is on a different level. At the sight of Narendra, my mind loses itself in the consciousness of the Absolute. To Girish, what do you say to that? Girish with a smile. Why ask me? As if I understood everything except that one point. Oh, laugh. Master. Again, I cannot utter a word unless I come down at least 2 steps from the plane of samadhi. Shankara's non-dualistic explanation of Vedanta is true. And so is the qualified non-dualistic interpretation of Ramanuja. Now, it's going to turn out that Narendra, no matter how much he's read of Western philosophy and other things, he's not familiar with this doctrine. So he'll ask, what is qualified non-dualism? So I thought that I would take a little bit of time and talk about these different schools of Vedanta. We have 3 main schools. There are other lesser schools of lesser importance, but the dualistic school, Dvaitavada, of Madhva, and then what we call Vishishta Dvaitavada of Ramanuja. So in English, they say qualified non-dualism, and then Advaitavada of Shankaracharya. Now, all of these primarily deal with this relationship of the individual self to the Supreme Self. Secondarily, they'll have some understanding of the nature of this external universe, but that's secondary. The primary meaning of, say, Advaita is that there's ultimately no distinction between this so-called jivas, individual souls, and the Atman or Paramatman. That if we think of the reflection idea, the only reality is the sun. There'll be many reflections, but they're only reflections. So this will be this oneness between the Jivatman and Paramatman. And Ramanuja, his idea is that there are many individual souls. They all dwell within Brahman, and this universe is also within Brahman. So it's Advaita from the point of view that Brahman alone exists, but Brahman has internal distinctions. So we'll see that he'll give the example of the bell fruit. But just to go back now to Dvaitavada, still there's everything, the Brahman is everything, but these individual souls, they can emerge out of the Brahman like sparks coming out of a fire, something like that. So 2 nice ways of understanding this. One is Hanuman's famous statement that if we take the standpoint of this physical universe, and I have this physical body, and I identify with that physical body, Deha, Buddhi, or Deha, Abhimana, then I can feel that I can establish a relationship with God, that there's separation, but connection. Some relationship will be there. Then, if I don't identify with this physical body, but I identify with my individuality. I'm an individual. I'm a person. I have qualities. I have my separateness from others. There are many different jivas and everything, and we all dwell within Brahman. So this will be that second, and then uh, Advaita Vedanta will say that when I understand that even this jivahood is just falsely identifying with these coverings and everything, and I eliminate all of them, then there's only oneness, individual soul. It turns out to be only real soul. So the other nice way, I don't know what the source of this is, but I like this idea very much. This Tattvamasi can be interpreted that Tat has different meanings for the different schools. So Tattvamasi for the Advaitin, there's a Tat will be uh, I am that reality. For Ramanuja, the Shishtadvaitavada, this Tat will stand for Tasmin. That means that I dwell within Brahman. And for the dualist, it'll be Tasmat. We come out of Brahman. So it's very nice grammatical way. I don't know who came up with this idea, but I heard it many, many years ago. The Tattvamasi, take Tattvam as a samasa, as a compound, and one signifies the Tat, one signifies Tasmin, one signifies Tasmat from that. So it's an interesting idea. So this for Sri Ramakrishna, these are all different points of view. That's all. The followers of these different schools will argue to the death that their view is right and the other is wrong. Thakur doesn't look at it that way. The term that's used for philosophy in the Vedantic system is a darshana. And as a darshana, sometimes it's understood that this is the result of realization, that they've come to this conclusion. Other way of looking at it is drishti, is that this is just a point of view. Or mata, we have this term mata that's also used. That can even mean just an opinion. Everything from a philosophy to a conception to some idea to just an opinion. So for Sri Ramakrishna, it won't just be a baseless opinion, but it'll be a point of view. And for him, all of this mata is a path. It's just a path to God. So he doesn't bother. He likes these different philosophical conceptions. He sees them as conceptions. He's very fond of this bell fruit example. We'll get to that. This bell fruit example. He's very fond of this reflection example. One is an Advaita example. The other is disqualified non-dualism. He's for Sri Ramakrishna, whichever one is helpful for us and gives context and gives some understanding and ground and basis for our spiritual practice, that's enough. There's no such thing as absolute truth when it comes to philosophy. It's not science. Even science, our conception is changing. What we believe one day, what we think is the atom is the smallest unit, later we find it can be split even. So, but with philosophy especially, he doesn't take this point of view that there's some ultimate absolute truth to any philosophical system. They're all good. They all have pluses. They all have minuses. Every religious tradition, he says, you'll find mistakes in all of these. But don't bother too much about that. Take the important parts. So anyhow, he'll explain to Narendra this idea of the bell fruit. And we get this in several different places. Sometimes Sri Ramakrishna will say, according to Ramanuja, other times he'll simply say that, as if he's expressing his own opinion, that if you don't accept the reality of jivas and the reality of this universe, you don't get the full weight of the bell fruit. So, but again, we shouldn't come to the conclusion that Sri Ramakrishna was a follower of Ramanuja. Some people believe that, and that he disavowed this idea of Shankaracharya. The only thing we can say is that when it comes to the status of this external universe, which, as I said before, is secondary to this question of the three schools of Vedanta, that his preference is to look at it as the manifestation of the divine. His preference, because he often says, I don't like to call this world unreal like a dream. Not that it's not a legitimate point of view for somebody and maybe the most helpful thing, but his preference is to look at it as all the glory of the divine manifestation of Mother. Okay, so now Narendra asks, what is qualified non-dualism? So, Master, it's the theory of Ramanuja. According to this theory, Brahman, or the Absolute, is qualified by the universe and its living beings. So there's Vishishta, it means there are Visheshas, that there are qualifications. These three, Brahman, the world, and living beings, together constitute one. Now, for the Advaitin, say we take the ocean and we take the waves. If you add the waves into the ocean, or you don't consider the waves, the weight will be the same, because they don't give the same realistic value to this apparent. The wave is nothing but the ocean. But if we take that as with the idea of the bell fruit, and then there's a greater reality. So he says these three, Brahman, the world, and living beings, together constitute one. Take the instance of a bell fruit. A man wanted to know the weight of the fruit. He separated the shell, the flesh, and the seeds. But can a man get the weight by weighing only the flesh? See, if we want to make this sherbet, there's a nice drink out of the bell fruit, we have to discard the seeds and we have to remove the hard outer covering. We only use the flesh of it. That's the essential portion. So we can throw the others away. That's fine. But if you go to buy it, you'll pay for the weight of everything. He must weigh flesh, shell, and seeds together. At first, it appears that the real thing in the fruit is the flesh, and not the seeds or shell. Then by reasoning, you find that the shell, seeds, and flesh all belong to the fruit. So the seeds represent individual souls and jivas, and this outer shell represents this jagat, this visible universe. The shell and seeds belong to the same thing that the flesh belongs to. Likewise, in spiritual discrimination, one must first reason following the method of not this, not this. Now, what Ramakrishna does is he takes this, now we're within a Advaitic teaching. The Advaitic teaching is that anything that's transitory, anything that's an object of perception, anything other than consciousness, than the seer, is not Brahman. So we're discarding everything like that. For Sri Ramakrishna, this is one step in spiritual practice to get us to the roof. It's not a final conclusion. It's not a siddhanta. It's not a final conclusion. So Sri Ramakrishna says sometimes, for the sake of sadhana, for the sake of spiritual practice, we make a distinction between sat and asat. Now, or we can say that what we've done is we've created a dualism. We've created two separate categories. But ultimately, this asat will disappear on its own. This is a Advaitic point of view. And we don't have to take that into consideration at that point. But for Sri Ramakrishna, this is only to get us to the roof, that it's to say that this visible universe is unreal, that this is only because we've mixed up everything, only to get to that pure consciousness. And then afterwards, we have a different understanding of everything. So the status of this external universe is something unknown and unknowable. And Sri Ramakrishna, he likes the Shakta idea that this is real but transitory. This is why almost every time we see this word is illusory, Thakur is not saying illusory, he's saying anitya. He's saying anitya. We were reading this morning, Mahapurush Maharaj, Swami Shivanandaji. Somebody asked him this question, what is the meaning of Brahman alone is real, the world is unreal? Or illusory, unreal or illusory. And Mahapurush Maharaj, he didn't answer the first day. Next day he came back. What was your question? And then he said, why do you call this world unreal? Instead, say transitory, anitya. Now, if we say transitory, we can suspend this ultimate question. We don't know what the real status of it is, but we know it's fleeting. We can suspend it. We can start out with just this, what the Advaitins called vyavaharika point of view. Vyavaharika simply means that we take things at face value. I see it, it's out there, I'm here, I'm something separate. They say we don't question it, we take it at face value. This is called naive realism in Western philosophy. So if we understand that everything, there'll be different opinions about what is the real nature of the thing in itself, or the thing in itself is unknown and unknowable. The thing in itself, if we're talking about interior, that's the most known and most knowable. That's our own real self. But Brahman manifests as the ground of this universe, this thing in itself. This is, there'll all be all different theories about how this comes into being, how it works and everything. Is the world really like a dream? When I close my eyes, does the world disappear? If it's a dream, it does. There's nothing there. But the Upanishadic idea is more realistic. That everything comes out of Brahman, it rests on Brahman, it goes back to Brahman. And Brahman is the heart and soul of everything. But it's still, for the purpose of spiritual practice, the main thing is to understand that there's something hollow about this world. It's not a metaphysical idea. It's a spiritual idea, psychological idea, that it won't be able to fulfill the longing of the heart. So when Thakur says avastu, it means there's no substance to it. It's not. Thakur doesn't always use these things with the philosophical meaning. That there's anitya, that everything is fleeting, everything is going by. We can understand these things very clearly. It brings dispassion. It'll release us from this hard identification with the body and the mind and everything, because we realize ourselves as being transcendent and beyond time and space and infinite and one with that absolute reality. So for Sri Ramakrishna, he says that we can reason following the method of neti, not this. This is a Advaita sadhana. God is not the universe. God is not the living beings, because now we think God is pure consciousness. How can consciousness be something physical? It's insentient, it's physical universe. So how can that be possible? Brahman alone is real and all else is unreal. Then one realizes, as with the bell fruit, that the reality from which we derive the notion of Brahman is the very reality that evolves the idea of living beings in the universe. So now we have two different things. One, for the Advaitin at least, absolute oneness between the individual soul and the supreme soul. But this visible universe will get traced back to Brahman itself. Here it's interesting. Most of the time he says Brahman has become this universe, right? But here he's saying that the reality from which we derive the notion of Brahman is the very reality that evolves the idea of living beings in the universe. So we have this idea that Brahman, Taittiriya Upanishad, he says, Bahusyam, may I be many. And then out of that evolves the different elements that combine and cause this, bring about this visible universe. Everything traced back to the consciousness, but some process of evolution. So this parinamavada, this is this evolution of this Shakti or power that belongs to Brahman, another one of the doctrines that we have. But the thing I keep going back to is that doctrine and reality and truth are two different things. Reality and truth is whatever is, it is. That's the way it is. The doctrine is our understanding, looking at it from a point of view. And they're all valid to the extent that we understand them to represent paths. So then one realizes, as with the bell fruit, that the reality from which we derive the notion of Brahman is the very reality that evolves the idea of living beings and the universe. So this is also an Advaitic view, but from the Shakta point of view, that if we say that if we accept this idea of the rope and the snake, now, is the snake unreal? It has no reality apart from the rope. But when we look at what we think is a snake, we're looking at the rope. So we can either say that, yes, that the snake is real to the extent or with the understanding that it's just we've superimposed some false idea on it, but we're looking at a rope. The other way of looking at it is to say that as long as I think that it's a snake, it's unreal. So Thakur reverses everything when he's asked, is this world then unreal? He says it's unreal until we have the realization of God. That means as long as I think that it's a snake, I don't know that there's some higher reality underlying it, then I'm in error. Once I know, then, and I may still see it, it still looks like a snake somehow, but I know it's not. Then we've reached that state of knowledge. So we can say that both the reality and the manifestation are real. So Thakur says, the Nitya and the Leela are the two aspects of one and the same reality. So Nitya, that'll be the unchanging eternal ground of everything. That'll be the ocean. And this Leela will be the play of the waves on the surface. Each wave is real insofar as it's nothing but water and belongs to the ocean. If we think that there's something permanent to a wave, then that's unreal. You can't remove the wave from the ocean. It's simply the surface. So the Nitya and the Leela are the two aspects of one and the same reality. Therefore, according to Ramanuja, Brahman is qualified by the universe and the living beings. Now, he's saying according to Ramanuja. Other times he'll simply say this because he likes this idea. It's true. He's very fond of this idea, but for him, it's an idea. The reality is so tangible to him that these are just different ways of looking at it. So Brahman is qualified by the universe and the living beings. This is the theory of qualified non-dualism. So theory, this is that school, that doctrine, and it has some internal consistency. Now, why do the Advaitins argue so much with both the dualists and the qualified non-dualists? There's a reason for this. A very strong reason from their point of view is that they don't like this idea that in the state of liberation, one simply disappears in this ocean of Brahman. They want an experience. They want the jiva to remain in some state where it can feel that oneness or feel some divine presence or live in the presence of God, all different types of mukti. So this is the real dividing point for the different schools, that any philosophy that will allow the individual to disappear in that ocean, then what kind of mukti is that? They don't like that. They want to remain, keep some sense of individuality to enjoy this divine presence of God. All different types of mukti. So what are they arguing about? If we understand that the individual soul, and for Advaita Vedanta, it's very hard to start with an individual soul because it's going to end up being just a reflection of Brahman. But anyhow, if we take it as a drop of water that falls in the Ganga, way up in Gangotri, and makes its way all the way down to reach the ocean. Now, does that individual drop become one with the ocean? Does it still remain as an individual drop merged in the ocean? Does it have some experience of now I'm merged in the ocean? This will be the argument that they'll have. That the dualists will not like this idea of just merging. Sayujya is mukti. They say to them that's the lowest type. They may accept it. So this seems to be why they argue so vehemently. And the dualists, for them, uh, it's a real concrete idea of some type of heaven, we can say, dwelling in the presence of God. It can be Vaikuntha, it can be this is Vrindavan. The Vaishnava theologians will have all different ideas about that. So uh, even for the Shaktas and everything, we have this idea, this Chini Hawa, Chayanaima, Chini Kete Bhalovashi, this Ram Prasad song, that I don't want to become sugar. I want to be able to enjoy sugar, to enjoy the taste of sugar. I don't want to merge and lose myself in that ultimate reality. Now, Swamiji used to laugh. What is this individuality? Once you have that merging, then there'll be real individuality. But these are questions for the theologians. And this is something that there'll always be differences of opinions with that. The salt dal, does it really at the bottom, does it just dissolve as one with the ocean? Then who is there to experience anything? So there'll be different opinions and different theories about these things. Most people prefer this idea of some type of heaven. We want to go someplace where everything's beautiful and perfect and fine. And Swamiji is very consistent with his philosophy that anything particular, anything that has the individuality, all of these things will have to be temporary. They'll have to be temporary. But this is why Sri Ramakrishna, he doesn't like too much philosophy. He said, do something, have some experience, and then understand it in the way you understand it. Yeah. First, meet this Jadu Malik. Yeah. And then if you're really curious, you want to know how much money he has, how many properties, you can ask him. But at that point, who will care? So, yes.
So that last point that you made, does it mean basically whether you understand or not what merging is or experience, which is the highest or not? As part of your sadhana, if you just believe that okay, here's my ishta, here I am, and I have to do what I'm doing with love and develop the love for the Lord, it'll still take you to whatever is the highest.
Yeah, there are two different ideas. One, that whatever we think about it, what is going to happen is going to happen. That it's I may be a radical dualist, and I may merge in Brahman, and that'll be the end of it. It may be the opposite. It may be that I think that there's no experience after that. There's only oneness, and it turns out that I go to some heaven or something. That we don't know any of these things. How exactly? The other idea is that our subjective understanding of it will determine the nature of that experience. So that someone who is a worshiper of Krishna, that they can merge in some type of Saguna Brahman, where they can have that type of experience. So there'll be some subjectivity to it. That form of God that we want to see, we realize that even in the final state of liberation. I myself have no idea. I I'm leaving everything up to them. Thakur and Ma. What they'll do with me, they'll do with me. Yeah. I don't see too much value in trying to answer these questions. Uh, we'll see every once in a while. We just read this morning. Sri Ramakrishna is asked, "There's a Paraloka. What is this afterlife about?" We stopped before we got the answer, but anyhow, he evades the question. He just talks about how we have to realize that ultimate reality and everything. And do we go to all these different lokas? The Pitri Loka, Chandra Loka, Surya, all of these things, do they all exist? Is there a different heaven for each different faith? That means a different type of experience. Yeah. When we were kids, we used to hear this joke. Uh, I don't want to use any particular religion, but all the religions can be like that. Somebody's given uh, a tour of heaven, and he says this is where the Muslims go, this is where Hindu, this and that, and everything. And then he's walking past one of the groups, and he says, "Shh, be very quiet." And he said, "Why?" He says, "They think they're the only ones here." Yeah. So it's what happens. Yeah, I feeling is that that's out of my hands. All we can do is do our spiritual practice and hope that we can have some direct experience, have some better type of understanding. But God realized soul does not become all knowing in the sense that all of these questions are answered. They'll disappear or they'll lose their importance, many of them. That's all. But there was one school that in the Buddhist tradition that Buddha was all knowing. He must have known even the number of grains of sand in the universe, the number of insects, Kita Sankhya, that in the whole universe, because he's all knowing. Others said, no, it doesn't mean that. In Vedanta, we understand all knowing means knowing that, knowing which everything is known. You know gold, you know everything made of gold. Doesn't mean that we do know every possible variety of bracelet and anklet and earring and all of that. Doesn't mean that. So, okay, so I'm going to read this because I broke it up, interrupted it so many times. I'll read it again because it explained beautifully this idea of Ramanuja's teachings about this qualified non-dualism, and at the same time, it's something that pleases Sri Ramakrishna very much. He says it's true. I don't know in Bengali if he says true or what exactly the word is. I didn't look it up this time. It may be genuine or positive, something like that. So he says, according to the theory of qualified non-dualism, Brahman, or the absolute, is qualified by the universe. So that means that now the real distinction between the qualified non-dualist and the dualist is the non-dualist. The Advaitins like to look upon Brahman as essentially nirguna. And the saguna aspect means that Maya has come into it. Whereas the qualified non-dualists and dualists, they like to look upon the saguna aspect as more important. For Sri Ramakrishna, there was no question, no distinction between both with form and without form. Equally, both Nitya and Leela. So that's why he could like both of them, but not consider either one to be exclusively true. According to this theory, Brahman, or the absolute, is qualified by the universe and its living beings. These three, Brahman, the world, and living beings, together constitute one. Take the instance of a bell fruit. A man wanted to know the weight of the fruit. He separated the shell, the flesh, and the seeds. But can a man get the weight by weighing only the flesh? He must weigh flesh, shell, and seeds together. At first, it appears that the real thing in the fruit is the flesh and not the seeds or shell. Then by reasoning, you find that the shell, seeds, and flesh all belong to the fruit. The shell and seeds belong to the same thing that the flesh belongs to. Likewise, in spiritual discrimination, one must first reason following the method of not this, not this. God is not the universe. God is not the living beings. Brahman alone is real, and all else is unreal. Then one realizes, as with the bell fruit, that the reality from which we derive the notion of Brahman is the very reality that evolves the idea of living beings and the universe. This is what Ramakrishna calls the state of vijnana. Going to the roof, coming back down again, then we see that we thought that something will be different up there, but it turns out that the roof is made of the same stuff as the stairs. The Nitya and the Leela, the relative and the absolute, or absolute, are the two aspects of one and the same reality. Therefore, according to Ramanuja, Brahman is qualified by the universe and living beings. This is the theory of qualified non-dualism. Now, this idea of not getting the full weight, we can say for Sri Ramakrishna, if we accept Brahman as only nirguna, we're not getting the full weight. Only as saguna, we're not getting the full weight. He wants us to accept everything. That this play of this universe is real. It's transitory, and it may be hollow, and we may get involved to the point where we forget everything and the bondage comes. But still, it's not just some mental projection. There's some reality to it. So for Sri Ramakrishna, many times they'll say, if we want the full weight, then we have to accept everything with a proper understanding. And the Brahman is both with form and without form. Now, there's another theory, and Sri Ramakrishna, sometimes he talks about it, and Swamiji liked this idea, that they represent different stages in spiritual life or a realization. This is kind of a dialectic, a Hegelian dialectic, that in dualism, that this can evolve into qualified non-dualism, and the highest would be non-dualism. Now, there's a reason for this, and there's also a reason to say no. All of them are capable of taking us to the highest. We don't have to think that we have to start as a dualist, that we can remain dualist the whole time, but the separation will become less and less and less, and we'll reach union. We'll describe it as union, not oneness, not that perfect identity. We'll describe it that way. But if we understand that the formless, if we take that as real, then we can understand how that which is formless can take different forms. Take different forms. So if we believe that God can appear in different forms to different people, then that reality must be formless. So if we water, for example, water, if it's not formless, it can't take the shape of different containers. So from that point of view, those who accept the form of God as something absolute, then they accept the fact that you look worshiping God as mother is also possible and true, because this worshiping God as father, that this is the form, this is the nature of God. So if we look at Thakur's example of that vat of liquid that's used to dye the cloth. Now, if that vat of liquid has a color of its own, then every cloth will have to take that color. If we can think, how is it possible for it to take the color that everybody wants, then that dye has to be colorless. But if we say that dye is colorless, that's colorless, that's the Nirguna Brahman. But it's not simply colorless. It has the potential to give every color. So this will be Ramakrishna's attitude. Or sometimes I like this idea of light. Light is no color. If we say that it's invisible, it has no color, we're not getting the full weight of the bell fruit, because it contains with it every color when it goes through the prism. So if we just say it's colorless, we're not getting the full weight. If we just accept the reality of the colors and don't know that the source of it has to be that which has no color of its own, then we're also not getting the full weight. So he had such an expansive view, all-comprehensive view, that he didn't like anything limited. If we just do this vichara and we don't develop any devotion, we're not getting the full weight. If we don't see that God can manifest within as the Antaryaman and can reveal itself or herself in whatever form to us, and we can have that relationship, we're not getting the full weight. So I take it that way when he talks about this Nitya and Lila and everything, that I understand it from the point of view of this Vijnana, not this point of view of just Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta. 2M. I do see God directly. What shall I reason about? See, he'll always come back to that. The value of this type of analysis and the limitations of it, both. That we shouldn't be fooled into thinking that we've really understood something or experienced something. And the limitations of these symbolic types of explanations of things, where we look upon the seeds as the jivan. Even this idea of the sun and the reflected sun. The sun is something insentient. It can explain how the sun reflecting in water and Brahman reflecting in the mind. Yeah, we can understand. It's a very nice analogy, but we see the limitations of that analogy. That doesn't mean I understand how the Brahman can, this light of consciousness can illumine the mind and everything. These are beyond the ability to fully grasp. That's why Sri Ramakrishna says that they give us a glimpse only. These analogies helpful, but we shouldn't think if we understand the analogy we understand the reality. The big vast difference. Anybody can understand how the sun can reflect in different containers without itself dividing itself. Does that help us understand how Brahman manifests the universe and yet remains unchanged? It gives us some picture, some idea. But if we think that we've understood everything, it's a great mistake. Now that's the beginning. That's a manana. That's enough that we can really dive deep and try to have some experience. So he says, I do see God directly. What shall I reason about? I clearly see that he himself has become everything, whether we say through evolution or through false appearance. These are all different ways of looking at it. He himself has become everything, that he himself has become the universe and all living beings. So are the living beings in the universe added on to it? Do they exist within Brahman? Is it Brahman itself manifesting? All different ways of trying to understand something that goes far beyond our ability to understand. Now, but without awakening one's own inner consciousness, one cannot realize the all-pervading consciousness. So how do we understand, if Brahman is consciousness, how do we have some idea of what Brahman is like? Our own individual consciousness. So Sri Ramakrishna says, you want to know the real nature of the sun, you have to do it through the reflected sun. So it's not by analyzing this external universe that we can come to the conclusion that Brahman is the cause and underlying everything. No, that we understand the nature of consciousness because I am conscious. That's direct, a paroksha, that type of knowledge. So this is why the whole Vedantic tradition is everything is turning within. Go within, deep within, try to find out the nature of that reality. That's I, the real self, the most known thing of all. How long does a person reason? So long as he has not realized God. But mere words will not do. As for myself, I clearly see that he himself has become everything. The inner consciousness must be awakened through the grace of God. Now, why bring in this idea of grace? Because this small self, this little ego, has to die. And once that dies, then the ocean itself has to absorb the waves. The Thakur gives all these beautiful illustrations. We want to bring water to the field. We have to dig the canal. We have to do that. In order for the water not to spoil it, we put a little floodgate there. Now we want to bring water. Can we bring water into the field? No. What can we do? We can remove the floodgate, the obstacle preventing it, then through the grace of the water. It's the nature of water to seek the lowest area, so that will automatically take place without our effort. We do our effort, then we step aside. He says, chopping down a tree. You make a little wedge one side, you start chopping the other. As soon as it starts to go, we step aside. We've done our job. The weight of the tree itself will bring it down. So this type of universal grace, Vedantic grace. Through this awakening, the person goes into samadhi. He often forgets that he has a body. So it doesn't mean we realize that I'm only spirit. No, we dwell within a body, but we won't even realize it at that time. He gets rid of his attachment to lust and gold and does not enjoy any talk unless it is about God. Worldly talk gives him pain. Through the awakening of the inner consciousness, one realizes the all-pervading consciousness. So we want to find out the nature of the ocean. We start out with the wave. We are that wave. We belong to that ocean. And we know the nature of water because that also constitutes the wave. Will we ever understand the whole ocean? No. The power of the ocean, how many different types of waves there are, all of that. No. We can merge and become one with the ocean. The discussion came to a close. And Sri Ramakrishna said to him, I have observed that a person acquires one kind of knowledge about God through reasoning and another kind through meditation. So in meditation, see, this reasoning, it has a very important role to play, but limited role. So this reasoning, it eliminates all superstition and false ideas and gives us conviction. And then we have to go beyond it. So I've observed that a person acquires one kind of knowledge about God through reasoning and another kind through meditation, but he acquires a third kind of knowledge about God when God reveals himself to him. So the direct experience. When God reveals himself to him, his devotee. If God himself reveals to his devotee the nature of divine incarnation, now we're getting not just this universe is a manifestation of Brahman, but there'll be certain individuals that will manifest in a special way, and there'll be some huge waves in the ocean, tsunamis, that will overpower everything. The distinction will be in power and special type of manifestation. If God himself reveals to his devotee the nature of divine incarnation, how he plays in human form, then the devotee doesn't have to reason about the problem or need an explanation. The Thakur's issue with Girish and Ram was that this was just their tremendous devotion. It wasn't based on any real experience or anything higher than that. When they declared him to be the Avatar, he appreciated their devotion and everything, but he would make fun sometimes. Yeah. One is an actor on the stage, the other is a doctor. What do they know about these things? Do you know what it is like? Suppose a person is in a dark room. He goes on rubbing a match against a matchbox, and all of a sudden, light comes. So there's some definite experience that comes. It's not that we deepen our conviction, we understand it better. Something will happen. Mind will go to a higher realm. Something will happen. Likewise, if God gives us this flash of divine light, all our doubts are destroyed. Can one ever know God by mere reasoning? As Ramakrishna asked Narendra to sit by his side, he tenderly inquired about his health and showed him much affection. Narendra to the master, why? I've meditated on Kali for 3 or 4 days, but nothing has come of it. This was after that experience, huh? When he was with the Kali temple. I think so. So now he's accepted Mother Kali, but meditating. He thinks all of a sudden he'll get that. Master, all in good time, my child. Kali is none other than Brahman. So for Sri Ramakrishna, Kali wasn't simply the Shakti that inheres in Brahman. It was Brahman plus Shakti. It was Nirguna, Saguna, Brahman together. She is the primal energy. When that energy remains inactive, I call it Brahman. And when it creates, preserves, or destroys, I call it Shakti or Kali. What you call Brahman, I call Kali. Brahman and Kali are not different. They are like fire and its power to burn. If one thinks of fire, one must think of the power to burn. If one recognizes Kali, one must also recognize Brahman. Again, if one recognizes Brahman, one must recognize Kali. So this is that Shakti idea. Brahman and its power are identical, or we can say inseparable. From this point of view, inseparable. When he talks about Kali and Brahman being identical, that means only one Brahman, Saguna and Nirguna. Otherwise, this idea of Shakti, then we can say that the Shakti can't exist without the reality, and that reality has to have that Shakti. It is Brahman whom I address as Shakti or Kali. It was late at night. Girish asked Haripada to call a cab, for he had to go to the theater. As Haripada was about to leave the room, the master said with a smile, "Mind, a cab. Don't forget to bring one." All laugh. Haripada smiling, "Yes, sir. I am going out just for that. How can I forget it?" Okay, so we'll stop here. We're at the top of page 735. Now, next week, I'm away. And the next week. So we won't have class for something like 6 weeks, I think, because I'm away next weekend and the following weekend. And then after that, I go to India for 1 month. So probably the next Friday night class will be December 9th, something like that. That that'll be the last class. So okay. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukham Bhadshrita Vikraham Ishavataram Parameshamedhyam Tam Ramakrishna Shirasa Namah. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So, in my absence, everything will go along as before. Everyone, please keep coming. Only these classes, my classes will be suspended for a while. Okay. Thank you, everyone.